My teaching journey during the last 17 years has been defined by moments of joy, surprise, unexpected twists and turns, frustration, challenges, and growth. And I've been very fortunate to have along the way many positive and rewarding relationships with children and adults who have impacted my teaching and whose lives I may have hopefully touched in some meaningful way. In 1988, I was eager to start a career. I was married with 2 children and had recently moved from Delaware to New York. I was at a fundraising dinner, and I had a brief but powerful conversation with Yvette Richardson. Some of you may know is a former SLC teacher and one of the founders of the Empowering Teachers Summer Institute. Yvette is very persuasive, and I found myself the next day or so meeting with Sarah Wilford to learn more about the Art of Teaching graduate program. As I interviewed with Sarah, I was immediately drawn to her warmth, her personable nature, her enthusiasm for children and for learning, and I was won over. I went back and I completed and submitted the application with just one day before the deadline. The next 2 years were very challenging, very wonderful in terms of thinking about what I had experienced as a learner, but understanding how powerful teaching and learning are, and having opportunities to think about how we learn, what we learn, when we learn, and where we learn. I worked in the Early Childhood Center with Marsha Levy in the Forest, where I learned to appreciate the learning environment and how it shapes the context for discovery, building meaning and knowledge. From there, I moved to Mamaroneck Avenue School, and I had the opportunity to work with Mary Jane Filippa in 1st grade and Lucy Platty in 6th grade. Those field placements offered me an opportunity to work in a school, in a public school, that was racially and ethnically diverse. And it was where that diversity was celebrated and the culture of professional learning was nurtured. I vividly remember a young boy named Brandon, a 1st grader, who had a smile that lit up a room, and he had the energy level to power a small appliance. I remember sitting on the floor reading, playing math games, or talking with a small group of students, and it was here where I began to learn how to listen carefully, to honor a child's perspective, and the art of kid watching. Then I moved into 6th grade. The rules of engagement were a bit more complicated. Freedom and time to explore topics of student interest are limited by having to complete a grade level curriculum, satisfy academic requirements to advance those students to middle school. But despite this, I was informed by how the teacher balanced the 2 competing demands of student choice with district goals and benchmarks. And as you all are aware, this struggle still persists in current K-12 classrooms, where the pressures are on to pass standardized tests, make annual yearly performance targets, and it compromises in-depth, powerful, rich teaching and learning. Prior to actually entering the classroom, I was afforded the opportunity to be here at Sarah Lawrence as program coordinator for the Child Development Institute. And in that capacity, I had an opportunity to meet with key educators in the field, such as Lisa Delpit, Howard Gardner, and Maxine Green, as well as our local scholars, Marjorie Franklin, Jan Drucker, Sarah, Mary Hebron, of course, who is the heart and soul of our program. And it is from forums such as these that, it's from forums such as the Empowering Teachers Summer Institute, the conferences, the annual Longfellow Lecture, that my understanding of child development was enhanced. It influenced my educational values, and it strengthened my advocacy for good teaching. In 1993, I was hired by the White Plains School District to teach 3rd grade. It was there that I was confronted for the first time with the political context and outside constraints that are imposed in public schools and on teaching. That was indeed the greatest time of challenge to the educational values I held dear. As I gathered my first class on the rug, my three Davids, David C, David B, and David G, and I went back to research all of this, because I'm telling you, 20 years is a long time ago. They appeared wide-eyed, eager, and curious. I asked the class to share their ideas and questions for a possible science investigation, and their responses led to a science unit that I titled How Things Work. As I invited students to take apart small appliances and machines, they were actively engaged, and there was labeling, there was categorizing, there was counting, there was reading, there was writing. But most of all, there was bonding. There was a strong sense of belonging that was established as the students worked together. Initial accolades and support for innovation and risk-taking quickly turned to parental angst and fear over what and if children were learning. Parents questioned my instructional practices as compared to the traditional teaching in the other third grade classrooms, and I would ultimately have to face and field their concerns and questions in a rather intense and heated meeting. Surviving that first year experience, I went on to teach third grade for 9 years, fifth grade for 2 years. And I even had an opportunity when I was in my administrative internship, educational administrative internship, of serving half of a school year at a middle school in White Plains. In spite of this new reality of public expectations and a child-centered approach, I kept my focus and commitment on providing children with opportunities for an active, personalized learning process. 10 years later, I would attend the high school graduation of this first class of vibrant, intelligent youngsters. 2 years ago, I met up with one of my students from this first class. She and her mother recalled time spent in my classroom, and they were very eager to tell me that she was pursuing a teaching career. Many lessons have been learned. As I prepared for the panel, I pulled out photos, class projects, and artifacts representing my teaching journey. I began thinking about the hundreds of unique and special students I've taught over the 17 years. I recall that in the 10th year, as in my first year, here I was again with 3 students who had the same name. Their name was Rachel. But each had a different spelling, different learning style, and a different personality. And I bring that up because I'm reminded of the words of Antoine Saint-Exupéry, our French aviator and author, and he wrote, "A rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral." This quote summarizes the essence of my philosophy and success as a teacher. Having the ability to see, recognize, and reinforce something beautiful, special, or unique in every child that walks into our classroom or school is the starting point to motivating them. No matter if it's elementary, middle, or high school, or graduate school, I'm learning. I have found that knowing a child's name, complimenting a student, acknowledging an accomplishment, however big or small, following up on a previous conversation, checking in on a problem, are all examples or powerful ways to get to know and honor a student's story and to motivate and to reach them. And it comes to my mind in particular, it was, I don't know, one of the third grade years. I had a student named JC, and JC was a rather difficult, stubborn young lady. And when she made up her mind not to do something, you could not move her. And her dad was very young, and he would come in and we would conference about JC, and I would try to give him some parenting tips on things that we could do. The last day of school came, and JC was not there. And I remember feeling so very empty. And we had and you know, the last day of school, you traditionally get out at like 9:30 or 10:30. So we had a faculty meeting, and I remember coming back to the room, packing up some things, and they I was called over the PA system, and they said someone was there to see me, and it was JC and her dad. And I remember just bursting out in tears because I needed closure and because she had been so special to me, because I had been able to reach her, and she just represented so much of what, you know, I wanted for children. There's a great line from the book Winn-Dixie, related by Gloria Dump to Opal. Maybe some of you know the book. If you don't, you would get it and read it. And Gloria Dump, who was a blind, recovering alcoholic, was with, she said to her, "Why don't you go on and tell me everything about yourself so I can see you with my heart?" One of the things I know for sure about good teaching is that it emanates from the heart to the mind. When students know how we care, know that we care and are sincere, they will rise to high expectations. While I'm no longer in the classroom, I still see myself as a teacher, but on a greater scale. The experiences I've had with the faculty and students in the art of teaching have contributed much to my professional development and leadership style and practice. As I continue on this journey, my own learning and development have evolved as I am now pursuing an EDD in executive leadership. I am hopeful, I am optimistic that we in public education can make the necessary changes to transform secondary education for the many young people who represent poor, underprivileged, and disenfranchised constituents in our society. And I want to be a part of that change. I want to be a part of building future public schools that will break the mold and incorporate a new paradigm for students whose environment is very different, who are actually showing us through their technological savvy and social networking how they learn. And it's time that we just listen and see. Thank you.